Hi everyone and welcome to a new episode of Realtor Talk. Today I'm here with my friend Gagan Gill.
Hello.
Thanks for coming on, Gagan.
Thank you for having me.
So Gagan works in the insurance industry and
Yes.
she's going to be telling us all about it. So why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Gagan Gill. I've been in the insurance industry for more than 19 years. Around 10 years of that was back in the UK. Around 10 years, slightly more than 19, actually 20 years. Don't want people knowing my age. But 10 years in the UAE. And I specialise in insurance, particularly in the real estate market.
Okay.
So I insure all the jointly owned properties in Dubai. Normally, on average, they're quite big projects. So anything between 300 million right up to exceeding a billion dirhams. So that's what I specialise in. But over the last 20 years, I've developed a good understanding of all lines of insurance.
Okay, so that's great, and you're going to give us an insight into all the different types of insurance for property owners and investors here in Dubai. So why don't we start with just going through the different types of insurance? Like, I might know what they are, but people who are watching will want to know what the different types of home insurance are.
Okay, so there's two elements to it. Jointly owned properties where you have multiple owners, the insurance for the building and the common areas is actually taken care of under a policy that the owners association or the owners managers would actually take out, and that normally comes out of the service charges that people pay each year. But that policy doesn't actually cover individual personal belongings. And that's where people really need to understand and be aware that, they need to insure their items. And, now we're living in a very indulgent world, where we end up not hoarding, but we do end up with a lot of possessions. If you just look around your apartment today and added up the values of items that you have, you're looking at, on average, 100,000 dirhams worth of contents that you end up buying and accumulating over a number of years. Yeah,
that's just an average, right? There's some homes which have, more extravagant things.
Yes, designer furniture, major improvements in the apartments or villas. And these things all need to be insured because, if you were to suffer a major loss, it could hit your wallet quite badly. And particularly now where we're in this situation of the pandemic, people are really cutting their costs, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't buy insurance or you should cut your insurance coverages. It's now time to ensure that you have proper insurance and you're protected, because in the event that something happens, we just had a Sharjah fire only a few weeks back, and that happened during the pandemic. So don't compromise on insurance. It's a very important aspect. And like I said, just look at your apartments and your villas, and you'll already have an understanding of how many items and valuables that you've collected which you need to insure against.
Okay, so you're talking about obviously personal belongings. Maybe just explain the difference between like home contents and personal belongings insurance.
Okay, so if we look at home insurance, there's three elements to it. So one element is if you're an owner and you want to insure the building itself, that's one element. Second element is your content. So contents includes things like furniture, any kind of improvements that you do to the apartment. I'd say TVs, beds, it's all your normal furniture stuff, that you collect. Then the third element of it is personal belongings. Personal belongings are items that you can take outside of your house. So things like iPads, mobile phones, designer handbags. So these are all things that you could lose, or it could get stolen, or could get damaged while outside of the home. So those are the three elements to a home insurance policy. Now, as I went back, most jointly owned properties already have insurance for the building, and that's mainly common in apartment blocks. In villas, it's sometimes different. Generally, the insurance for the villa per se may not be covered under the service charge element. and therefore you may need to buy some form of building insurance. And even if it's not a jointly owned property, it could be owners that own villas in areas that are not considered a jointly owned property, but even they need to insure the building structure, the villa structure, against any kind of losses. So that part is an aspect that the home insurance would take care of. And then you have the contents, and then you have the personal belongings, which I've explained. Then there's this second element to the insurance where things like alternative accommodation, loss of rent, and that's normally something that you need to look for in the insurance policy. Make sure you have some cover for that. So in the event that there's a major damage that's covered under the policy, for example, a fire incident happens, and you have to seek refuge in an alternative accommodation, or you need to seek refuge in a hotel, it's important that you have some cover for alternative accommodation, because sometimes if there is extensive damage to your property, then you may not be able to access it for a long period of time, and that could hit your wallet quite badly. So try and get some cover for that aspect as well.
Okay, that's very interesting. And I just wanted to make a point on the home insurance, like the building cover. Most developers, they give a 1-year warranty on just basic defects in the property when it's brand new, and then a structural defects over a 10-year period. So Dubai is still quite a young city, so a lot of the buildings aren't 10 years old, but you have to just make sure that you're aware that for any structural defects, especially if you're buying or living in a property that's over 10 years old, that you do look into having this insurance.
Very good point. I just wanted to stress that the insurance wouldn't cover any kind of defective design, but the resulting damage would be covered. So generally your home insurance policies will have certain perils listed. When I mean perils, I mean certain incidences that would cover you against under the policy. So main aspects would be flood, fire, earthquake, malicious damage, theft. So these are the perils that you would see under a standard home insurance policy, and that's what you'd be covered against. So when I talk about defective design or poor workmanship, that is generally excluded under the policy, but the resulting damage would be. So let's say, for example, there was some water damage, a major water leak that happened, and it caused extensive damage to the contents. The home insurance would cover that, because it would cover things like burst pipes.
Okay.
But generally, sometimes in some buildings you will find that the pipe work is defective, but the cost to actually replace all the defective pipes wouldn't be covered.
Wouldn't be covered.
But the burst water pipe, as a result of that, which caused damage to the contents, personal belongings, or the building structure, would be covered.
Okay, and the replacing that stuff could be very expensive. Replacing all the pipes.
As I said, on average, you're looking at 100,000 on average.
Okay,
so that's a huge amount. Huge amount.
So when you're looking at that contents, because that's the next thing I really wanted to ask you, is about how do the insurance companies appraise like the property or for the personal belongings? Is there a process for going into the home and checking what kind of insurance and how much you need to be appraised for, basically, on your policy? How does that work?
Well, the good thing is now, like other industries like retail, insurance is becoming more digital. So, customers can easily go online and buy a home insurance policy without having to have someone come in and assess the values of items. If you're looking at a very expensive luxury property, in excess of probably 2, 3, 4 million, then perhaps yes, some insurance companies might want to come and survey the risk. You can easily buy a home insurance policy online, click of a button. What you need to be aware of is, as I said, have a look at the items that you currently have. What would be the cost to replace it?
Okay.
Yeah, and based on that, you would add up all the items, and that's what you would base your insurance policy on, and that's what we call a sum insured. Valuables are a little bit more tricky. Now, most insurance policies would have a condition that if the item is of a certain value, you have to declare it on the policy. Mainly things like expensive jewellery, valuables are generally defined as jewellery, watches, gold, silver, platinum, etc., or any kind of antiques. So those you would need to declare, and always keep a receipt or get a valuation done on any jewellery that you have, and then declare that to the insurance company. It's very important you do that beforehand, otherwise you'll have a problem at a time.
Yeah, when you want to claim, it becomes difficult. You don't have the proof. Okay, great.
And then you can, like I said, the process is very simple now, and it's very easy to buy a policy online.
Yeah, you can do it like you would your car insurance or anything like that, right?
Exactly.
Okay, and what's the difference between residential and commercial when, say someone's looking to insure a commercial property versus a residential property? Is there any real difference?
There is a difference. The risk is different. See, your home insurance, you're mainly covering your personal belongings. In an office, for example, commercial risk, you have so many different aspects. You've got offices, you can have restaurants, you can have hotels, and they have different insurance requirements, and they would normally need to take out a business insurance policy covering their individual business exposures, I guess. So that would be very bespoke. And again, depending on the type of business, again, a lot of the stuff can also be bought online, or you might need to seek advice. Maybe you can seek advice from an insurance broker, or you can consult with insurance companies to discuss, what your business is, what you actually do, what kind of assets you have. And different businesses will have different requirements. And also this concept of business interruption as well, which is covering any loss of gross profits or gross revenues. So different businesses will have different exposures, if you like. So that again will require bespoke policy depending on the nature of business. Okay,
that's very interesting, definitely. Here in Dubai, I was mentioning before that it's quite a young city. So the residential buildings the age isn't as old as somewhere like a London or a New York. Is there much of a difference in the policies and the premium you have to pay on the insurance policies between buildings here in Dubai, or is it pretty much the same?
Okay, the biggest challenge with the market here is that we have very low penetration levels. So people don't buy insurance as much as people do in Europe or US. Just to give you a figure, you're looking at 2% penetration levels in this part of the world versus 15% in Europe and US. So that's not a negative. That means that there is, as the awareness grows, that we do envisage those penetration levels to increase, and that's what we want to see. Generally, the risks are a little bit different. As you touch base on newer buildings, newer fire protection systems, newer buildings. So that means the risks are a little bit better. But we also have this whole issue of aluminium combustible cladding, which has been widely used in construction here. And that's caused a bit of a concern within the insurance market. We are seeing significant amount of claims arising out of combustible cladding. Big claims, not huge. And that's the concern, and that's where you may see a difference in insurance premium. But generally, it is very, very affordable. You can easily buy an insurance policy depending on, what sums in. It always depends on what sum insured you buy and what valuables you declare. So the premiums vary according to your specific requirements. But on average, you can easily get a policy between 250 to 750 dirhams, and that's an annual premium. And again, it depends on what coverages you're buying.
Okay, because what I wanted to ask you was...
So you're looking at anything between 2 dirhams a day to have cover.
What's the basic... Because everyone's always worried about their expenses and they're not necessarily thinking of the worst that could happen. So you're saying 250, 2 dirhams a day.
On average.
What's the bare minimum? If someone was looking for the bare minimum insurance that they should get, what would be the one you would tell them to do if you were only doing one thing for your insurance?
I think there are a lot of policies that give you quite extensive cover, and obviously there is a premium attached to it. I think basically you just need to get your contents insured,
Okay.
and your valuables insured. You don't really need that extensive cover. If you're going for the bare minimum, just get your contents insured. That's the most important, and get some alternative accommodation and loss of rent cover.
Yeah.
I think that's very important, and I think that should be enough for you for the time being, because the thing is, the contents are where you'll see a big hole financially if anything was to happen and all your contents were to get damaged.
Yeah.
Because replacing those items in one go will hit you. So just make sure you've got cover against fire, water damage. I think those two are the most important common claims that we're seeing here in the Middle East, particularly now with cloud seeding. We're seeing a lot of rain damage claims.
Yeah.
Burst water pipes is very common, and this is the bare minimum risks that you should get insured against, and just cover your contents. I mean, you don't need too extravagant covers covering your personal belongings outside your apartment. If you wanted the bare minimum, that's what you should probably focus on.
Okay, and you were talking obviously about the cladding. So that's the cladding that when a building, if it does unfortunately get on fire, that it can spread pretty quickly across the building. Do you recommend that residents always check the kind of cladding on their properties, and if they do, then look more intently at getting the fire insurance?
Yes, that's a very good idea. Yeah, if you know that the building has some form of cladding, and that's something you can always ask. You can always ask the building managers.
Yeah.
They'll be able to sort of share that information with you. But you can always see it from outside anyway. Most buildings do have it, and you should definitely be buying some form of insurance. Basic home insurance cover is a must if you're living in any of those types of buildings. And even then, even if there is no cladding, like I said, the risks of water damage is still quite frequent in this part of the world, and that is something that you need to insure yourself against. We're seeing heavy rain this year. We saw very heavy rain activity. Again, that causes water to seep in, and that can cause damage to your contents and your personal belongings. So really worth getting insurance, even whether you live in a building that has cladding or not, is still important.
Still important to get it. That's a good point. And the cladding, just to point out as well, they've banned the certain type of cladding.
Yes, new regulations have come out, so it's getting a lot better.
Yeah.
It's more the older buildings where there is still the old combustible cladding, but things are I'm sure depends on the building and the building managers, the developers, if they're still in control of that building, or owners associations. Some of them are coming together and looking at ways to try and minimise the risk of it. And that's something that is quite good if they are doing that. But again, if there is that exposure, protect your personal belongings and your contents.
Protect yourself.
Protect yourself, yep.
Exactly, you can't always rely on other parties to do it.
Exactly.
100%. Okay, so I want to transition to a segment I always do on this podcast. I do a top 5 with all my guests, Gagan. So on this top 5, since we're talking about insurance, I wanted your kind of top 5 tips when someone's looking for a policy, what they should look for in that policy.
Yeah, absolutely. Tip number 1 would be to look at your individual circumstances. And if I'm a tenant and I'm living in an apartment, then I should really insure my contents. If I have any kind of expensive jewellery, then I should maybe insure against that. Perhaps I'm a villa owner and I need to insure the building, and I'm a landlady and I'm renting out the apartment, then I should get landlord. We'll get the building insured and then get landlord's liability cover under the policy. Those are the different kind of scenarios. Also for the tenant, if you're living in an apartment, you should also take out tenant's liability, because if you cause any damage to the apartment, then the landlord could hold you responsible. Yeah. So it's good to get some liability insurance under the policy. So look at your individual circumstances and get the cover that is required for you to meet your requirements. That would be
Okay.
tip number one. Tip number two would be is always look at the coverage. Just because it's cheap doesn't mean that it's good. You buy what you pay for. Sometimes people go for and look at the price and think, I've got a fantastic deal, but when it comes to claiming, they realise that the policy doesn't cover them for what they needed.
Yeah.
So step number one, if you get that right, if you get look at a policy that meets your specific requirements, that should avoid that issue. So don't always look at the price.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Look at the risk carrier as well, their experience in home insurance, their experience in handling claims. That's a very important observation to have. Fourthly, I've already sort of touched base on the digital aspect. It's really easy now with the click of a button to get your contents and your personal belongings insured quite easily. So look at the options available online. There's some fantastic deals. And the fifth tip would be is very important. Don't underinsure. Just because you've got insurance, doesn't mean that's enough. Make sure that the sums insured that you're buying is adequate to cover you if a loss was going to happen. So one thing you've got to realise is that the cost of replacing an item can sometimes be more than less. So you really got to look at the items that you have and look at what would be the cost to replace it in today's value.
Yeah.
It could be very different. It could be a lot higher. And insurance policies do have a provision in there that if you underinsure, so if you buy less cover to cover your belongings, then they will only pay a proportion of the claim if a partial loss was to happen. So that means you'll be self-insuring yourself in situations like that. So there are provisions in the policy. It's called underinsurance. And that's where insurers will apply average if you do underinsure your items. So it's very important to really look at the values and look at all your items and insure them for the correct value.
Okay, thanks, Gagan. That's really insightful and some incredible tips for people who are watching, because people, when they go online, I think they just do a comparison and they're not fully sure.
Cheapest,
looking at the cheapest and not really looking at the fine print and what's actually covered.
Always look at the conditions in a policy. That's the most important thing. And make sure you follow the conditions. Certain policies will have certain claims processes that you need to follow. And one of them I touched base on is keeping the receipts.
Yes.
And any valuations on any expensive items, keep hold of that, because that is something that you will need to show at time of claim. In fact, the most easiest thing would be is when you're buying the insurance policies to give those details
Receipts
at that
at the
time.
same time.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good point as well. I recommend taking photos and stuff because they do fade sometimes as well,
Exactly.
these receipts. You talked about water and you talked about fire damage. What are the most common claims that you find here in Dubai? Is it in that, or are there other claims as well?
Generally, I think generally we've seen fires happen in apartments, cooking fires, candles, hair straighteners. Those are the common causes. Balconies sometimes also, if you keep too many combustible furniture outside and, cigarette smoking. These are all kind of, your problem areas, electrical faults, but they all generally result in fires.
Okay.
We also see water damage, as I touched base on. There's two parts of water damage. Some claims come out of burst water pipes, which is very, very common. And normally you get that a lot in newer buildings as well, because obviously it takes time for the building to settle and the pipework to settle in the building. So you'll always find that in newer buildings you're more likely to get water damage, burst water damage claims, which can cause extensive damage to your contents, if there's a major leak. And then thirdly, as I said, the global warming is a big issue. We are seeing changes in the climate. Obviously cloud seeding in this part of the world. So we're seeing more rains than before,
Mhm.
and heavy rain can cause extensive damage to property, and particularly where water seeps in, and that is very, very, very common, and that can seep into apartments and cause damage. So these are probably the three common areas for claims.
Okay, that's really interesting. Do you see much in, like, I know this is a really, really safe part of the world, but in somewhere like the UK, you'd see a bit more burglary and stuff like that. But here,
I mean,
do you really see it at all?
Not as much, no. And I think that's the beauty about living in this part of the world, is that it is very safe. And then also, particularly in apartment blocks, you have extensive security downstairs. You have security cameras. So generally, that those kind of risks are a lot less. But again, you just don't know. So it's always good to have an insurance policy that covers you for things like that. And generally, most standard home insurance policies would. They would cover things like theft. But there is a condition in most policies that it's got to be a forcible entry. Okay. So what that means is, just because you got an insurance policy, don't leave your front door open. Don't leave the keys under the mat. Don't be reckless.
Okay, because a lot of people do that here in Dubai. So
very
just
relaxed,
be careful. Yeah, just be careful.
Don't do that. Don't keep your keys under the mat. Lock your doors. Be prudent. Act as though you have no cover.
Okay,
that's the best way to be.
That's a good bit of advice. I was just talking about the UK. Do you see much difference in the way policies here in this part of the world are structured compared to other countries across the globe, or is it pretty much the same?
Yeah, I mean, generally the bases are very similar, but I'd say in the UK, Europe, and US, these are far more developed countries in terms of insurance buying. As I said, the insurance penetration levels are much, much higher there. So, you do see different sort of types of covers there. In the UK, you have things like landlord insurance, and, it's very, very bespoke. We are seeing more and more requests for that in this part of the world, and I think in the future, as the market develops and people become more aware about insurance and the insurance penetration levels increase, then you will see more diverse covers coming in. But at the moment, it's a very we're at a very early stage,
it's
and
not mature,
lower penetration levels. So as times go, we do see more diverse covers being offered by insurers, but that's the long-term outlook.
Okay. Why do you think, because we're mentioning the penetration levels being quite low, why do you think that is at the moment? Is it the lack of knowledge or the lack of education in insurance here?
I think so. I think also, it is a very transient place, and people come here and they expect to be here very short, particularly with the expat community. They tend not to look at living here long term. But then, funny thing is, on average, they end up staying a lot longer than what they envisaged. And they do accumulate belongings and contents and furniture, etc. So, that doesn't mean that just because you're looking to be short term, that you shouldn't buy the insurance, because you don't know what could happen tomorrow. So, you should always protect yourself against risks, basically, that you can, that you can protect yourself against. And the other area is obviously the local market. Again, it's the awareness, and it's and hopefully that will change, and we are seeing things change. And the insurance market, year on year, you can see a good amount of growth, which means that people are slowly becoming more and more aware. I'd say in the commercial area, people are more savvy with insurance in this part of the world. They will make sure that they buy all the relevant covers. I just think on the personal insurance level, still there is that lack of perhaps awareness and understanding. I think if it's not mandatory, then people don't buy it, and that is that is an issue, because you do need it. Just because it's not mandatory, you do need it. When it happens, that's when you'll realise that you should. I should have bought it.
Okay, so that was really insightful, Gagan. For anyone who's looking to make a claim on the policy that they have, what's the general process to do that?
Okay, General process is, as I said, most insurance companies now are becoming quite digitally savvy, so it's quite easy to contact your insurer. You can either do it, some of them may have an app, or you can just send them an email. But what I do suggest is, as soon as the incident happens, notify your insurers. Whether you have the full details or not, it's always good to notify them. And then you can do a follow-up email with supporting documents, take photographs of the damage, a brief description of what's happened, the extent of damage, and also make sure you have your tenancy contract, your title deeds, and your Emirates ID documents ready, because you may need to submit that when you send the details across to the insurers. If the extent of the damage is quite vast, the insurance company may send out a loss adjuster. A loss adjuster normally acts independently for both parties to find a suitable resolution to the claim.
Okay, so thanks for coming on, Gagan. This has been really insightful, and I think anyone who's been watching or listening today is going to have a lot more knowledge about the insurance industry. I certainly have. If you want to just let people know where they can find you, and if they want to know more about insurance to contact you, please feel free to go ahead.
Absolutely, I'm on LinkedIn, Gagan Gill, and you can ping me a message on there, and I'd be more than happy to help.
No problem. I'll put the description with her details as well, so that you can contact her. Otherwise, Gagan, thanks for coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
No problem. And please check out the other podcasts on Realtor Talk. Thanks for watching.